So route planning and navigation is going to build a lot of confidence as you're planning for your trip. So this is something that we're going to do, after we've selected our hunt area, we've done all our research, we've kind of narrowed down the area. Now we want to start looking at travel distances, altitudes, potential water sources. All those things are going to be really important now to help us find success once we step foot in the area. And this is really critically important if we're not able to do any, on the ground scouting. The other thing that this is going to do is it's going to help us, have this large area, break it down into smaller chunks, and not make, these huge mountains, as overwhelming as maybe they first appear. So, what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at our area and we know where we want to go, then we start looking at access points to the closest, access point to get where we want to go. We can start breaking that down, and I highly recommend that we start looking at, what is the distance that I am going to cover in miles or kilometers, however you want to do it, from, my insert point, be it the trailhead or whatever, to my first campsite. And then from that campsite, to my glassy knob or to a water source. And if that's the area that I'm going to hang out in the entire trip, then maybe I don't need to do a lot more than that. But if I'm going to be moving with a backpack on my back, then I'm going to go, okay, day one, I'm going to cover 3 kilometers. And I'm going to gain 1,000 feet of elevation. And then day 2, we're going to cover maybe 5 kilometers. Now, obviously, this is open to kind of interpretation when we get on the ground. But what it allows you to do is, opposed to looking at a big ridge or this large map going, oh my gosh, like this is going to kick my butt, you're sitting there going, listen, it's 5K. And I know what my travel distance is. I know where there's a water source. And so it helps to start digesting an area and really breaking it down into small, manageable pieces. So, when I'm looking at daily hiking distances, I like to use, 2 kilometers per hour if I'm on a trail. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to take into consideration a lot of things. You have to take into consideration the pack weight. You have to take into consideration, what your hydration and nutrition is like, especially on day 3, 4, 5, or 10. You have to take into consideration the altitude and the temperature. So I think if you plan on 2K an hour on a trail, you're not going to be disappointed. When we start going off trail, I would plan on 1K an hour. And the reason is you've got blowdown, you've got side hills, you've got insecure footing. And then when you start putting, hopefully a bull or a buck on your back, then, that's really going to slow things down. So just for planning purposes, if you do that and you're kind of conservative, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. The next is altitude. So, I've had several friends that have come from back east, out to the west. I used to live back east, and the altitude is something you don't think about all the time because you can't see it. But the reality is that can shut down your hunt quicker than anything. So you could be super fit and living at sea level, but if you're going to fly into, say, Denver at 5,000 feet and drive to a trailhead at 10,000 feet, it's going to be a completely different experience. And again, that's going to factor in, to those travel distances. So we have to factor this time frame into our planning and what that training area is or the hunting area is and what those elevations are. So as a general rule, here's what we want to look at. As 8,000 feet, we'll call 8,000 feet the baseline. So if I'm leaving from sea level, I'm flying to 5,000, I'm driving to a trailhead at 8, we want to sleep there for at least 24 hours to acclimatize. Now, we can move around, we can hike, we can scout, we can do all that. But then for planning, if we want to go up to 12,000 feet, we want to plan 24 hours per 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So what does that mean? So if I spend one day at 8,000 feet, then the next day I can move my camp to 9,000 feet. Now I can go hike higher than that. You'll hear a standard climb high, sleep low. So we can move our camp to 9,000. We can walk or hike up to 10,000 to a glassing knob. That's fine. But we want to come back to 9,000 to sleep. We're going to spend 24 hours there, then we're going to move up. So if you take this into consideration, you're looking at 5 days before you are properly acclimatized, coming from sea level, to actually go and sleep at 12,000 feet. So if you're going on an early season mule deer hunt and your hunt area is at 12 or 13,000 feet, you have to take these things into consideration to kind of stack the odds as much in your favor as possible, and not get pushed out of the mountains by something like altitude. Like I said, we can't even see. So again, this is really important when you're looking at those hunt areas, when you're trying to plan your trip, to take all that into consideration. So the next thing is weather. So a lot of times what we'll see is it's warm at the trailhead, or it's certainly warm at the airport you fly into, or it's warm back in your barn when you're planning your trip and you're packing your gear and you and your buddy are trying to cut all the ounces as possible, and you're like, man, it's 90 degrees here, it's super humid, it's going to be fine, it's going to feel real nice at 10,000 feet, and it is. But you have to take into consideration that it could be winter at 10 or 12,000 feet any month of the year. Out west, we've gotten snow. So again, as a general rule, what we want to plan for is there's a 5-degree temperature change for every 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So if it's, say, 75 degrees at 8,000 feet, we're going to plan 70 degrees at 9,000 feet, 65 degrees, at 10,000 feet, etc. So depending on the elevation gain that you're going to have and where you're going, that's going to drive your clothing selection and your sleeping bag selection. So all those things, again, are gonna be figured out early on when you're planning, back at home. The next thing is water sources. So what kind of water sources do we think we're going to get? As an example, if I'm getting water off a glacier, or I'm hoping to get water off of snowfields that's just running and dripping off, that may be a different type of water filtration than if I have running streams or even a river to start drawing from. So I might not be able to use certain pumps. I might not be able to use a steri pen if I have glacial silt. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, but the worst thing that could happen is that you get into your hunt area and you realize that you either can't access the water sources that you were hoping to, so that's going to shut your trip down immediately, or you've got something like a steri pen that you're trying to take care of water that's got glacial silt in it, and the next thing you know, you're filtering water through your underwear to get the silt out so that you can use the steri pen. So all these things can be taken care of with some planning, and yeah, you have to take some assumptions, but that's part of the fun, that's part of the process, and that's something that, over time as you gain experience, especially if you go back to the same area, that you're going to start to figure out. So, the one thing I like to do is not just rely on, a computer screen I'm looking at or my phone screen. I like to get a large scale map. I like to look at a large scale map of my area. You can go to lots of different places. You can go, get U.S. Forest Service maps. You can go and get specially printed maps. That's what I generally do once I kind of figure out my area. I normally get a 1 to 50,000 scale if I can. A 1 to 100 is really big. 1 to 24 is about as good as you're going to get, but I like a large scale map. And what I do by it is I lay that down on the table and I'm able to see the playing field, I call it. I'm able to see the entire hunt area, and I can start picking out certain terrain features. I can look at where the trailheads are. I can look at where prominent roads are. I can look at where campgrounds are. I can start using what I'm seeing on maybe Google Earth and put it on that map. And for me, anyways, and I know I'm a little old school, but it helps me get a bigger shot of the playing field, so that I can start to maneuver and go, okay, well, if this doesn't work, then maybe I can move to this spot. If this doesn't work, then maybe I can drive around and go to this spot. And that map, because I don't have to turn the computer on, I can just lay it there. I can start to look at it. I can see it all summer. I can start making notes, and I really think that that's going to help. You kind of get a feel for the scale of where you're going. I like to say that we're trying to exploit terrain to our advantage. And so, what do I mean by that is that you can go out there and kind of kick your own ass if you're not using the terrain to your advantage. So as an example, if I'm going to go from a trailhead to a camp and there's a ridge in between, if I just drop a waypoint from point A to point B and walk that straight line, I'm going to be going up over a ridge. Maybe it's not the best terrain for me to walk over. Maybe I'm climbing hundreds of feet or even 1,000 feet out of my way that I didn't need to if I'd have just walked around. I'm trying to exploit that terrain. Where am I going to put my glassing knob? Right? If I put my glassing knob right above where I think the mule deer are, in the morning thermals are going to be sucking downhill. That's not using the terrain to my advantage, right? So I want to exploit this terrain. And when you start getting into later season hunts where there's potentially snow on the ground and you have avalanche hazard, or you're looking for spring bears and you're looking for avalanche chutes on south faces that are starting to green up, like all those things you start to look at to exploit terrain to your advantage. You're not just going out there and randomly walking around. I mean, that's not going to be the best use of our vacation days and help us stack the odds in our favor if that's what we're doing. So we really want to try to exploit this terrain. We want to look for those travel ridges, right? So ridges that aren't super steep that, man, if I just get on this, we can walk up, we can gain thousands of feet. Glassy knobs. Where's my campsite? Is it a campsite that I'm just over the roll of a ridge where I'm tucked into some trees and my thermals aren't going to affect anything, but I can, within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I can climb to a glassy knob and look down into a basin I want to look at. That's trying to exploit terrain to our advantage. But to do that, I really think that it's critical that we all learn how to read topo lines, right? Contour lines on a topographic map, because those little squiggly lines are providing us valuable information that if you don't necessarily understand what those are when you're looking at them, then you're going to overlook so many small key features that could really play a part in your success. Now, mapping programs are great. I get that, and I think they're wonderful, and I absolutely use them. But a lot of times we default to the satellite imagery, which is cool, right? I love seeing that satellite imagery. I like knowing where the parks are. I like knowing where some burns are. I like knowing where some patches of timber on north faces are. Those are all super important. But those contour lines are going to tell us so many things that we need to know about. So as an example, prominent features, landmarks, saddles, ridges we can walk up, peaks, things like that are all going to be super important for us to understand. It's also going to keep us out of terrain that we don't want to be in. So, if lines come together to form sharp little V's and they're very consistent, those are drainages. And so those drainages, depending on the scale of whatever map you're looking at, be it digital or printed, that may be a drainage you may not be able to go across. And you want to stay out of drainages. You want to stay out of box canyons. You want to stay out of cliff areas. As you're coming down a mountain, you may run into a set of cliffs that you can't get down without ropes and rappelling. And it can be very dangerous, especially when you're in the dark. So, you understand those topo lines and you can overlay them with the satellite imagery, and all of a sudden you have a really great picture of what you're doing, how to exploit that terrain, places to stay away from, and places to use to your advantage. The next thing is terrain association. So once I've looked at the map, I've got my satellite imagery, it's really important once you get in the area, you want to take that and you want to look at the map, say on your phone, and you want to associate that with what you're looking at. So as an example, you have this peak in front of you, it has an altitude, an elevation stamped on it. You want to be able to associate what you're looking at on the map with what you actually have in front of you, to kind of contend with, because sometimes, as we all know, satellite imagery looks a little different. Google Earth, how many times have we, kind of said, oh yeah, this will be no problem. I can jam in there 8 miles, and get that bull out, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, it looks totally different. And so we want to be able to associate the terrain from the map to the actual environment that we're in. The other thing this allows us to do is, instead of walking around looking at our map like this as we navigate, we're able to use prominent terrain features to navigate. So they're called handrails, or they're called catching features. So I know if I look at the map and I've got this long ridge kind of running up to my right-hand side, that as long as I keep that ridge on my right-hand side, I know that it's going to move me in the general direction that I need to get to. And then after, a course of, let's just say I'm moving 3 kilometers, so I'm going to plan my 2K an hour, so an hour and a half into it, I'm going, okay, I should be in the general area. Then I can pull out the GPS. Then I can pull out the actual digital map and see where I am. But I haven't had to look at it, because I knew that as long as I caught or kept this ridge on my right, it was going to take me where I wanted to go. Or if I'm going to move up to an area and I go, hey, you know what? I'm going to hit a lake. So that's a catching feature. I'm probably not going to miss a lake, so I'm just going to move in that general direction. I pick a couple prominent landmarks. I'm going to walk that direction. I'm going to exploit the micro terrain, so I'm not going up to go down. I can walk around things. But all of a sudden, when I hit the lake, when I see the lake, I'm like, oh, I know where I am. That catching feature has helped make my travel efficient to get me where I want to go in the general area. So, this is really important, kind of as you get on the ground, to move in the area as efficiently as possible. The last thing I would say is, this is all good when we can see, but all of a sudden at night, when we're trying to navigate at night, that's when all this really becomes super critical, right? Because the game changes in the dark, and to kind of put as many odds as our favor as possible, we want to try and hunt too dark, right? We want to stay there glassing. We want to stay there sitting on that bull, hoping he makes a mistake, whatever it is, till dark. And then if we can't get it done, then we can back out of there. But all of a sudden now we have to navigate, say, back to camp if we don't have our camp on our back. And if we just drop a waypoint, or we just go, I'm here and I want to go here, if we don't understand the terrain, if we don't understand the contour lines, if we don't understand all those things, I just talked about, that's when you end up getting cliffed out at night. That's when you end up in a nasty drainage that you don't want to be in. And at that point, you almost maybe don't even have a choice but to sit down and wait till sunup. So, the game definitely changes at night. And that's why it's important, use this, time of year to, go out and scout, shed hunt, go up to a lake and fish, or take the family camping. Like, there is really no off season. I'm always training. We're always training for kind of like the big show in the fall. And, now's that time to do that, because the more prepared we are, the more we understand where we're going, the more efficient we're going to be, and ultimately, hopefully we find the most success.